Tinc l'honor de presentar-vos el professor Zygmunt Bauman, professor emèrit de Sociologia de les Universitats de Leeds i de Varsòvia. Probablement el sociòleg més reconegut internacionalment avui dia. Des de ja fa molts anys ha estat treballant primer en la crítica de la modernitat, després en l'anàlisi de les societats contemporànies, ha desenvolupat el seu concepte de modernitat líquida, aquesta modernitat en la societat que ell anomena postespaial, en la qual els vincles es desfan i els compromisos es desdibuixen. Ha plantejat abastament la qüestió de la seguretat en un món hostil, el divorci entre poder i política, el dèficit del poder dels estats-nació en el procés de globalització, en fi, tot el que és el recorregut des de l'estat social al que en podríem dir l'estat de seguretat. La seguretat com a estratègia del poder, la seguretat i els mecanismes de construcció de la por per la via dels processos d'excepció. Bauman avui ens parlarà de la qüestió de les fronteres en aquesta societat postespaial i especialment del paper de la ciutat com a laboratori, com a lloc de funcionament dels mecanismes d'inclusió i exclusió. Moltes de les seves obres estan traduïdes al català i al castellà, per tant és un autor conegut i incorporat en l'activitat cultural catalana. Potser els llibres més reconeguts són Modernitat i Holocausta, En busca de la política, L'ambivalència de la modernitat, Modernitat líquida. El seu darrer llibre és Liquid Love, en el que segueix el seu anàlisi sobre els comportaments en la modernitat líquida. És, per tant, un aconteixement tenir avui el professor Bauman entre nosaltres i és amb ell el que li passo la paraula perquè ens pronunciï la seva lliçó.
I am, however, very grateful to Josep Ramoneda. He wrote to me the first letter informing about the series of lectures about borders and asking me to contribute to this series. And he set a very inspiring topic for my lecture in this letter, Many Cultures, One Humanity. Wow, it's a beautiful frame for thinking in our contemporary, liquid modern, very complex, very difficult, very risky, very dangerous world. Frame our thinking, our concern with our own life and the life of people around us is actually placed between these two extremes. Many culture, reality. One humanity, ideal, destination, purpose, task. Many cultures, the past. That's what we inherited from millennia of human history. One humanity, a future, first predicted by Immanuel Kant, who wrote about allgemeine Vereinigung der Menschheit, the universal unification of humankind. 200 years ago, very few people read his predictions. Recently they rediscovered this little book about the future of mankind, and suddenly everybody became interested, which is a very good sign, because it shows that the awareness, the consciousness that it is actually a topical issue, something on the agenda today, is growing. This feeling, this sentiment is growing. Josep Ramoneda set this frame, many cultures, one humanity. Well, there is one invisible third element between the two, between many cultures on one side and one humanity on the other. Invisible but necessary. The middle element is border, the border. Border is what separates or perhaps unites many cultures and one humanity. Borders. We are, ladies and gentlemen, obsessed with borders. And that's a paradox. It is a logical paradox, but not psychological paradox. Logical paradox is the following one, that borders in our globalizing world, fast globalizing world, borders become less and less and less effective. They lose their meaning, their practical importance. But as they lose their importance, they acquire more and more significance. And that is precisely logical paradox. It doesn't stand to reason. But I suggest to you it is not psychological paradox, because psychologically, the less successful we are in drawing the borders, more obsessive we become in drawing them again and again, and in a more sophisticated way than we have done it before. We are obsessed with drawing borders today. The less they are effective, the more we are obsessed. And the big question which I would like to ask you and myself together is why we are so obsessed with borders. What is the reason? And here I should start answering this question from quoting the great contemporary anthropologist from Norway, Frederick Barth is his name. If you haven't read him, I recommend to read him. He's a very wise man. And what he pointed out, what is the message of his analysis, is that borders are not there to guard differences. It is exactly the other way around. It is because we have drawn a border that we are aware of differences. Differences are products of borders, not borders products of differences. Well, to make it clear, I think it's a very apt observation, really. To make it clear, I ask you, all of you here, to look at your next neighbor on the right side, on the left side. Would you find really any identical features between you? We are all belonging to human race. We are all members of humanity. But we are so terribly dissimilar. There are no two identical human beings on the whole planet. But somehow, most of these differences do not bother us. They don't stop us from interacting. They are not important. We overlook them. We are not aware of them. Only some differences suddenly jump into our attention, become tremendously important, and induce all sorts of frantic action to do something about it, to annihilate the differences, to eliminate them, or to annihilate the different people and eliminate them. They are very selective, these differences which we notice. Most differences we simply don't notice, we don't consider them to be relevant to our living together. So which are important? Well, first you draw a border, and then you start looking for justification of this border being put in this place. And the differences, and particularly differences which we consider incompatible, are justifications of drawing the border. That's the beginning of the answer. The next step would be to ask, what sort of differences are becoming important because of the borders which we are drawing today? Why are we so obsessed with borders? How to explain our passion with borders today? And once we answer this question, then we will better understand why certain differences become so important and others are neglected. Well, to put it very briefly, our today's obsession with drawing borders is the product of the hopeless hope that we can actually cut ourselves off from the dangers, from the threats, very misty threats, unnamed threats, which come from far away. Well, to put it in a nutshell, one could say that our obsession with borders today comes from the fact that we are trying to find local solutions to globally produced problems. And that's why it is hopeless, because there are no local solutions to globally produced problems. There are only global solutions to global problems. That's why it's hopeless. But that's the only thing which we can do to think seriously, because as you probably know, all our historically created tools of collective action are local. They end at the level of nation state. We don't have any tools of effective tools of collective action above this level. While power to do things evaporated from these local institutions. We have politics without power, and above this level, at the global level, we have power without politics. So we had 200 or 300 years of modern history of very close, sometimes friendly, sometimes stormy, but nevertheless cohabitation of power and politics at the level of nation state. Now we have the time of divorce, not just divorce of the marital couples, but also divorce between power and politics. So we are using our only tools of effective collective action, which are local tools, with the hope that they will somehow fence us off, protect us, guard us from the uncontrolled, chaotic world out there. We fear this world because we are, in a sense, on the receiving end of these global developments. On the receiving end of these global developments, we are suffering uncertainty, fears, nightmares, which are the result of the processes on which we have no control, of which we have only very partial knowledge, and which we certainly are too weak, we feel too weak to master. That sentiment produced by such a situation, when we really can't very well anticipate future, is, ladies and gentlemen, what is normally called the feeling of insecurity. In fact, I would like to use the German term introduced into the thinking about our civilization by the great Zygmunt Freud. He wrote in German, and what he used was another word, Unsicherheit. Why I quote the German word? Because it is a very complex notion. In order to translate Unsicherheit into English, you need 3 words: uncertainty, insecurity, and unsafety. All 3 are combined, put together in this concept of Unsicherheit. Or if you take the French word précarité, also very complex notion of shaking ground. We are living on a very wobbly soil, frail condition. We don't know how long it will last. And it, mind you, it shows itself virtually in every aspect of our life. The companies to which you dedicated many years of your professional life, you serve this company, suddenly disappear. go bankrupt or are swallowed by bigger companies, together with the jobs which they offered you. Demand for your skills. You worked very, very hard to get these skills, to learn them. You got a very high class diploma from your university to testify that you have them. This demand suddenly disappears. There's demand for different kind of skills of which you have no inkling. And suddenly at the venerable age of 40 years or 45 years, you find yourself in the position of a pupil. You have to start from scratch because all you have learned is of no use. Take human relationship. Human relationship. They are also frail. They are also frail. They are, as they say, until further notice. You don't know how long they will last. They are not anymore till death do us part. They are until satisfaction lasts. And if your partner is the first to be dissatisfied, then you can wake up without a partner. On the other hand, seeking relationship is also a very traumatic experience. On the one hand, in this liquid world, which Josep Ramananda mentioned, in this liquid world, we need commitment, human friendship. We need a hand to be stretched to us in case of a necessity. So we need a firm mutual bond with other people. On the other hand, because the world is liquid, because everything changes so quickly, because some opportunities disappear without warning and others replace them, we are afraid, consciously or subconsciously, that if we have too firm commitments, if we tie ourselves to other person, that may prove not an asset, but a burden. New opportunities come and we won't be able to use them. So you see, wherever you look, it's always the same story. Everything changes. We don't know what is the moving force behind these changes. It is far away, somewhere there in the global space, which we can't really see at close quarters, and we don't know how it operates. But we are taking the blow which comes from there. The frailty of human condition, uncertainty of human condition, that is what bothers us. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the frantic activity to draw borders is aimed against this insecurity. It is insecure world out there. So let us lock ourselves up somehow. Let us surround ourselves by closed-circuit television, by immigration officers on the borders, the specially trained dogs, which will transform every passenger into potential criminal, potential terrorist. Let us buy better locks on our doors. Let us hire the armed guards to guard the part of the town where we live, to keep strangers away. Well, these sort of things which perhaps will prevent this uncertainty coming into our homes, to our own direct surrounding. It's a vain hope, I repeat again. It won't stop companies and jobs from vanishing. It won't stop our savings for the old age suddenly disappearing. It won't save demands for skills disappearing. It won't make human bonds stronger. In other words, we live in a different world than the one which I studied was the reality when I was a student. It was half a century ago, mind you. I learned from Jean-Paul Sartre at that time that the secret is to have a projet de la vie project for the whole of life, and once you have this project for your life, that you know exactly what to do step by step, today, tomorrow, the next month, the next year, and there is a consistent way leading to your ideal image which you want to make into reality. It sounds laughable today. Who is planning for the rest of life? Boltanski and Chapelot, two very perceptive French sociologists, wrote a book, Le Nouvel Esprit de Capitalisme, in which they described our contemporary world as cité par projet. Cité means, as you know, polis, society, community, everything in one, rolled into one, but it is held together by projects. We move from one project to another, each one short term, each one not actually guaranteeing success later. One of the foremost theories of contemporary working conditions, labor conditions, put it very bluntly: you are as good as your last project. And the memory of your last project, of your last success, doesn't last very long, you know. So you don't accumulate any achievement. You just move from one project to another. Life cut into a series of episodes which are very poorly connected together. And the other thing which I learned as a student about society was from one of the founders of my discipline, Emil Durkheim, who is famous, among other things, by saying that, well, these fleeting, floating, short-term pleasures, individual pleasures, are deceptive. You can't build happiness on that. But fortunately, he said, there is this everlasting, permanent, stable, solid reality above you, society, which outlives you and your short-term pleasures, and you can simply get meaningful life by investing that in the society out there. Well, it was 50 years ago. Since then, I went through 3 different kinds of societies, not because I moved places, but because societies moved places, you know, and the only stable element which connected these periods were just laughably short individual bodily mortal life. Well, that is roughly the explanation which I am able to give why our obsession with borders. And a little bit of prediction which I attach to it, that it is a hopeless endeavor, because walking this road, we won't achieve our purpose. We won't eliminate insecurity which eats into our social life. Fear and insecurity. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as you remember, in the midst of the Second World War, painted beautiful image of the world free from fear, free from fear. Well, it hasn't been done as it was hoped it will be, and we are very much in the back into the beginning. The consequences now of this obsession with the drawing borders, with separating, and this so far invincible sentiment of fear and insecurity. Alain Perrefit, analyzing the secret of the astonishing, tremendous success of modern civilization, pointed out, he suggested that this tremendous success was due to 3 kinds of trust, 3 kinds of confidence. Trust in ourselves. I can do it. If I learn the right kind of skills, if I think very carefully, if I stretch myself properly, I can do it. Human beings can do it. The other trust was trust in other human beings, namely that they will also behave like that. They will follow our own example. They are rational beings which will join our efforts to create a decent world in which to live. And the third trust was the trust in institutions, social institutions. They will live forever. Between my plan and its implementation, they won't change. I can therefore think ahead, far ahead. I can rely on the institutions, the rules of the game which society creates. Now, all three kinds of trust are today under big question mark. Right, the trust in my ability to do things, withstand the adverse tides of unknown, unpredictable changes in society. It's very wobbly trust. Trust in other people, well, with our obsession about boundaries, of course, there's very little of it left. And obviously, not the trust in the longevity of the social institutions, because as we see, they change very quickly, without notice, and sometimes in a very unpleasant way. So, what is happening today, ladies and gentlemen, is trust which is seeking desperately a safe haven where to anchor and can't find it. Wandering trust. Trust without attachment, without reliable address. These are the problems, and I think that if you are serious about tackling the difficult issues which haunt the planet which we inhabit, if you want, among other things, to cure our obsession with drawing borders, separating, segregating, creating enmities, hostilities, and so on, then I think we have to do something about these essential things, about mitigating, alleviating this haunting feeling of insecurity. That's the key. Now, because the center is quite rightly focused on urban studies, the city is in the focus of your investigation, I think I would try to exemplify what I said so far on a brief survey of the problems which are mostly our city problems today, problems of our cities today. And it is not just one example of many possible, it is the major location for the problems. More than half of mankind lives in the cities today. And the rest of mankind who do not live in the cities yet are very rapidly urbanized. They are under influence of cities, even if they are not living in the city themselves, in cities themselves. And the cities in which more than half of mankind lives today, spends most of their life, are the places where all these outcomes of this chaotic, unplanned, uncontrolled globalization process come into fruition. They become visible and they are experienced. In three respects, I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, the first respect is that the cities are the dumping grounds, dumping sites for the globally produced problems. Dumping sites in one sense, off-cuff, for example, pollution of water, pollution of air, warming up of planet is global product of the chaotic globalization processes. But it is the elders of the city, it is the municipality of the city which has to fight for cleaning the air, for cleaning supply of water, and so on. The massive migration of people around the world is also the product of globalizing processes. But they end up inside the city, these migrants, these economic migrants, these asylum seekers, these refugees, they end up inside the city. And the creating of decent conditions for them, decent conditions for human cohabitation becomes again a city problem. Two examples of examples of city being on the receiving end, being the dumping ground of the globally produced problems. The second, it is the battlefield. City is the battlefield. Battlefield between two foremost values which are struggling in contemporary world, freedom and security. Both are crucially important for right type for the prudent and decent human life. I don't mention human happiness, that's a very lofty word, but just decent human life. And confrontation between them takes place exactly at the territory of the city, among the city inhabitants. I will elaborate a little bit on these topics a little further. And the third crucial role of the city is that it is a laboratory in which local solutions to global problems are undertaken, that is true, but at the same time, the ways of acquiring the habits, the skills, the arts, the abilities which are necessary for resolving these issues on the global scene are also experimented with. It is a big laboratory of the experiments in human peaceful cohabitation, human understanding, and human dialogue. City is the place where strangers live together permanently without stopping being strangers. They retain their differences, they retain their strangeness. Nevertheless, they live together. Each time you go from home to your working place, you pass a street, you meet hundreds of people who are complete strangers to you and who will stay strangers after that as well. For this reason, cities were always the places of contradictory sentiments. One contradiction was between what I called proteophilia and proteophobia, and the other was the confrontation between mixophilia and mixophobia. Proteophilia, where it comes from the famous Proteus, described in ancient poetry as a wondrous creature which could change its shape at will. Whatever he wished, he changed its shape. Proteus, Protean behavior, Protean condition stands for rapid, drastic, radical change. Now, proteophilia means that we actually enjoy change. That is the attraction of the city. That's what why cities attracted people from countryside. People from countryside ran away from this dullness, tedium, boredom of local life when everybody knew everybody else, everybody knew everybody else meant that no one surprised anybody anymore, and therefore it was a very tedious life to be conducted. Now you came to the city and everything could happen. You were exposed to adventure, to enjoyment. You could be surprised over and over again. The Germans in medieval times had a saying, Stadtluft macht frei. You know, the air of the city makes you free. And they had in mind precisely that so many different interesting things may happen. On the other hand, to living among the constant change, when very little things are stable, produces the contradictory feeling of proteophobia. Well, too much change, and you never know how much is too much, but there is a lot of change. You feel slightly endangered, threatened. You don't know what may happen. You don't know whether the same shop will be still there on the same corner of when you come there. And obviously, if you come to a supermarket, the chance that you meet twice the same shop assistant is minimal. If you found company from which you bought your car or your television set or your internet provider, the chance that you speak for the second time to the same technical advisor is virtually non-existent. They are all changing. It is a fluid world, and you have nowhere to place your trust in. So there is a constant struggle between proteophilia and proteophobia. You are attracted and repelled at the same time. Therefore, experience of living in the city is always very ambivalent, and ambivalence causes, as you know, a lot of anxiety. The same applies to mixophilia and mixophobia. You would like to mix with strangers, that's why you go to single bars, to discotheques, to restaurants, to public places, because it's interesting. You see people who are very different. You learn something on the occasion. You go through interesting experience. On the other hand, being surrounded by the strangers very often is a very frightening experience. Very many people very often are afraid when they find themselves suddenly in a crowd, surrounded by strange faces. They know no one here. And when you are going to outside places, to other cities to visit, when you are acting as tourists, you normally follow the very narrow paths which are provided for the tourists only. You don't mix with the local population. If you meet the local people, it is only in the role of the waiters, hotel maids and things like that. But you are in a secure enclave, which is the tourist territory only. Mixophilia, mixophobia, proteophilia, proteophobia, they stand for these two values, freedom and security. They are both tremendously important for complete, meaningful, and decent and relatively happy human life. The problem is, however, that they need each other, and at the same time, they very often come into conflict with each other. Zygmunt Freud, 70 years ago, as you know, wrote this little book about civilization and its discontent, in which he explained the unhappiness of contemporary civilized people, it was 70 years ago, by the fact that they surrendered too much of their individual freedom of choice for the sake of more security. And I always keep repeating that if Zygmunt Freud sat here in my place, he would probably repeat the same story, that there is a conflict between freedom and security, but he would say that the happiness of contemporary men and women comes from the fact that they surrender too much of their security in order to get more and more freedom. So the more you go into one direction, the more you feel that the other value is missing. And the city is a territory where people try to find the right balance between the two. You have the tendency towards more and more freedom by providing in contemporary city more and more public spaces where strange people can actually meet and engage at least in a temporary interaction. Sometimes they can talk to each other, sometimes they can strike friendship with each other, establish more or less durable relations with each other. That is the expression of this tendency towards the positive freedom offering aspects of the city. This mixophilia, proteophilia is in action here. On the other hand, you have in contemporary cities the tendency towards building walls, drawing borders, separation, spatial segregation. Very powerful tendency, mostly in the United States of America, but more and more in European countries, in contemporary France, in contemporary England. I know less about Spain, but I suspect that it won't be defended against the general trend. Tendency towards so-called gated communities. People hide themselves in a closely guarded territory if they have enough money to buy themselves a flat or a house there. Territory surrounded by armed guards. They are watching 24 hours a day, and only very special people are let inside. Strangers are kept away. If you can't afford buying yourself into a gated community, at least you buy better locks to put on your door and burglar alarms, and you install closed-circuit television to keep strangers away, or you join the local vigilante group to do the same, namely to keep the strangers away. So there is a tendency to what I call the voluntary ghettos, as distinct from the involuntary ghettos, because the other side, the other aspect, the reflection of voluntary ghettos are involuntary ghettos, to which people are dumped, not because they want it, but because they are not let out, because they are not allowed to go out from there. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, you hear the expression no-go area in the city. It means different things to people from outside and people from inside. For you, for me, no-go area means I won't go in. I keep away, right? I just circle around in my car. I never go inside. But for people who are inside no-go area, that means not I won't go in, but I can't go out. I'm not allowed to get out from here. So the tendency towards building voluntary and involuntary ghettos inside the cities. They are both present. They are struggling. That's what I call that. That's why I call the cities the battlefields of freedom and security, and where the future of these two essential values in human life will be decided. In what way? I'm not a prophet, I can't predict it, but nevertheless, it is this territory in which the outcome will be decided. And laboratories. You read Huntington. Huntington writes about the imminent war of civilizations. Civilizations cannot be reconciled, they are different, they can't live together. In every city, including Barcelona, this very general statement the prophecy of doom of Samuel Huntington is translated into specific people, which look differently, which behave differently, which dress differently, but which are nearby, close to you, in nearest proximity. Sometimes they live in the same house where you live. You meet them in various capacities, not as embodiment of the imminent war of civilization, but as shopkeepers, waiters, workers, co-workers in the same factory you are employed, and so on. And they suddenly are transferred from this abstract category into the category of individual human beings with whom you can speak, again strike friendship, and so on. The ability of living together is tested. And knowingly or unknowingly, you are step by step, gradually, emancipating yourself from this fear. They are just ordinary human beings. Some of them are nice, some of them are nasty. But so are other people. All people are divided into nice and nasty. And what is even more important, sometimes the same people are nice, and sometimes the same people are nasty. So, laboratory of developing the art of living with difference. Living with difference may be a problem of the planet, because we are in planetary dimensions, all interdependent, at the same time in permanent conflict with each other. But translated or transferred from this high area, high level, down here to the daily life with strangers, it may help to develop the kind of abilities which will be necessary in order to find common language, engage in a dialogue between different places, different sides of the planet, different populations, different nations, different races, different civilizations. The task will stop looking so awesome, so frightening. It will suddenly be not suddenly, slowly, but nevertheless steadily transformed into realistic purpose, realistic which is within our power. And we can actually do quite a lot inside the city to increase mixophilia against mixophobia, to develop this sort of art of living with strangers. As Richard Sennett, one of the most profound sociologists alive today, pointed out, studying American experience, the we feeling always has the other side. When we say we always imply them who are not belonging to we, us and them. So we feeling is a way for men and women, he said, to avoid looking deeper into each other. It is escape from facing up to difference. And he also found out that the more you are segregating, the more uniform is the environment which you inhabit, the less you are able to tackle the issue of human beings being different. Well, it adds to what I said before, to this issue of laboratory or a school in the art of togetherness. Well, I already took too much of your attention. I hope that there will be questions and comments, critical comments to what I said. I would like only to finish up with repeating after one of the most brilliant English journalist, Madeleine Bunting, journalist of The Guardian, of the English Daily, who wrote about Spanish experience. Spanish experience after the outrage of this terrorist act at the Madrid railway station, but mostly after the reaction which Spain gave to this terrorist attack, which was so encouraging, so humane, so different from reactions so far to the terrorist acts. What she said in an article which is called Thank You, Spain, what she says is that the images which we have seen in the past few days offer two alternatives to what the city might mean in the 21st century. A place of terror where the stranger is to be feared and distrusted, or the determined solidarity of strangers. Determined solidarity of strangers. A sea of hands waving hastily scribbled messages with the one word that says everything. This one word was no. Thank you, Spain, for giving us this choice. Thank you. Thank you.